Today we're going to discuss the turmoil of the late Roman Empire, paying particular attention to the reigns of Diocletian and then later on Constantine, two of the most important emperors of the late Roman era. Diocletian. He is ruling by senatorial decree, and his whole goal here is to stabilize the empire. Diocletian felt that the Roman Empire had gotten too big. He has the background to do this. He's a strong general within the army. He has the support of most of the army. And for those that try to oppose him, he goes ahead and imposes his will on government agencies. You fell in line with Diocletian. You kind of had to, and we're going to see some of his policies later reflect that sort of take no prisoners mentality. Now, along with saying that the size of the Roman Empire got too big, there's another one of his policies that really tries to go back to what Rome was before, and that is this sense of unity, particularly amongst the Roman mythology. Now, this is going to run into direct conflict with a problem that has been brewing within the Roman Empire for quite some time, and that is the Christian question, which we talked about in class last time. He wants to go back to this whole idea of worship of the emperor as a mark of loyalty. He needs to find some sort of binding force to sort of hold this together. Now, as a result, we end up with mass persecutions of Christians. It was known quite simply as the Great Persecution. It's not particularly about Christian beliefs. Diocletian really didn't care about other people's local customs or traditions. What he cared about was Rome and its uniformity. And with Christians there not being partaking, I should say, amongst these renewed Roman festivals, that's a problem. Now, in sheer numbers and volume of kills that we see amongst Christians during this time, Diocletian is doing an okay job. He's not doing this, like I said, out of malicious intent, but he's doing this out of a need to try and solidify his reign. And the sheer numbers as far as how many he kills, many of them in Colosseums, as you see pictured there, it's pretty staggering, and it's pretty terrible. However, what he ultimately creates is a set of martyrs. He creates symbols of this Christian faith throughout the empire, and ultimately we're going to see in a couple of generations Christianity become one of the dominant religions in the Roman Empire. So his attempts to stamp out Christianity, they're largely a failure. However, if you put yourself in the mindset of Diocletian, he felt that it was necessary. I'm not saying you have to agree with his policy of persecuting Christians or anything like that. Definitely would never say that. But from his perspective, he sees Christianity as a legitimate threat to the stability of the Roman Empire. Ultimately, however, Christianity, as we know, survives. Now, the first problem, let's go back to that, the size of this empire. Look at it, stretching from the Rhine River, the Danube River, all the way up into England, into Scotland, northern Africa, into the east. You've got a lot of territory to cover. So, ultimately, what he decides is that Rome is too big. We're not going to just give it up or start handing it over to African or Eastern Asian or Germanic tribes. But what he decides to do is he divides it. You have Maximilian in the west as one of the co-emperors, as well as Constantius I. Now, and keep this in mind when we start talking about the fall of the Western Roman Empire. What you're going to start seeing, and it's already been happening economically, and in many respects even politically, but we really start to see with the reign of Diocletian a conscious decision to shift focus of the empire to the east. In the east, along the Black Sea, the Aegean Sea, with what will eventually become the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, is you're going to see more and more of what represented sort of old school Roman mentality in the east and less in the west of Rome. There are many people that argue one of the reasons that the Western Roman Empire fell was it sort of forgot what it was like to be Roman. And you can sort of see that here with Diocletian's tetrarchy, where he splits it, and he is really ruling from the east. Now, after this tetrarchy, chaos follows. Oftentimes with these emperors, and we've seen this before, is you'd have a really solid, important emperor, and then sort of a period of just mass chaos, where you have a bunch of people claiming the throne. The fact that he divided it up, it even furthers that idea of chaos. So, eventually what is going to see happen is from 306 to 337 AD, we're going to see Emperor Constantine come to the forefront. It's not an easy road for Constantine. He's one of 7 people that are claiming control for this entire Roman Empire. It's very important to note that Constantine was actually a protege of Diocletian, so he knows what he's doing. There are a lot of accounts, however, that Diocletian never really trusted Constantine fully, felt that he was too ambitious, felt that he could one day sort of take over his reign. That ultimately doesn't happen, at least during Diocletian's time. But Constantine is going to emerge as the leader of Rome. Now, Diocletian is persecuting Christians. Constantine, on the other hand, does something radically different. He, in these fights to decide who is emperor, actually embraces Christianity. There are stories in the literature that he had a dream in which he saw this burning Christian symbol, this Chiro, and that it was a symbol from God that he was supposed to take the throne of Rome. Ultimately, how much that actually happened, we don't know, but what we do know is that he used Christianity as a uniting, binding force amongst his troops. It's really not till the reign of Constantine that we actually see the crucifix come into the forefront as far as Christian symbols are concerned. Once he gains power and authority, he issues one of the most important edicts of the late Roman Empire. That is the Edict of Milan. This Edict of Milan, while it did not make Christianity the official religion, it did allow for the free practice of Christianity. So there is, at least on paper within the Roman Empire, there is no longer the mass, widespread persecution of Christians like you saw under the reign of Diocletian. We'll go back to this in a minute, but first, let's talk about his capital, Constantinople. Now, this is actually, it's built on the Byzantium site. Byzantium was actually right here between the Black Sea and then the Aegean Sea along the Bosporus Strait. It was easily defended. It's actually not named Constantinople until after his death, many, many years later. But once again, we're seeing now the official capital of the Roman Empire not being Rome. It's in the east. We're seeing once again this shift towards the more lucrative east. There are a few reasons for why the east was much more lucrative. First, it was closer to trade routes. Second, it was because of natural geography. You had a few mountains here. It was easily defended because of its location. You have less and less Germanic attacks, particularly as the Germanic tribes start crossing the borders into Rome in the west. He accepts Christianity. The Edict of Milan, like I said, on paper it eliminated religious contention. He supports Christian religion, St. Helena, the building of churches, even pagan religions are supported. A lot of the other mystery cults are allowed to exist under Constantine. However, what he wants to do with all these different sort of offshoots, because Christianity, it's not a united church by any stretch of the imagination. So he forms the Second Council of Nicaea, which was, in essence, trying to make, in many respects, like governments try to make a uniform rule of law, he was trying to make a uniform rule of religion as far as the Christian faith is concerned. He used imperial troops to suppress dissent amongst Christians. There are reports of many of the groups that would not conform to what the Nicene Council wanted, that they were actually persecuted. We get the Nicene Creed, which is still used, the Holy Trinity. He also, at this council, attempts to clear up any questions and any sort of misconceptions about Jesus and his deification of what he was while on earth. Setting dates, all these things. It's trying to promote a universal rule of religion, what they call the official canon. Now, the canon is basically what is going to make up the books, the regulated books of what the Christian faith should be. Okay, and not just the books, but also who the leadership, what they were supposed to do, what they were allowed to do, what they weren't allowed to do. Here's just a little sample here. Just read through these on your own. There are all sorts of rules as far as, they don't want a younger woman to be in the same house as a priest, to, where's one? Prohibition of usury. Usury was loaning money out on credit and charging high interest rates. So they don't want the clergy to sort of be in the money-making business, be in the credit card business, basically. Or even things like what you're supposed to do, during Mass. All of these things. Trying to make a uniform canon law for people to follow, for people to really be able to gravitate towards this religion and say, this is what Christianity is. Ultimately, Constantine, calling this Council of Nicaea, it set out to end the disputes and splintering of the sects within the Christian world. Ultimately, it's going to fail in the short term and really in the long term as well. Not all groups are going to key in on this idea. There's still going to be disagreements amongst Christians in the world. In the long term, there was a great schism, which we're going to talk about in our next unit, during the Byzantine Empire. We're going to see the separation of the churches between Constantinople and Rome, and they're really going to divide into what will be the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern or Greek Orthodox Church. Ultimately, near the end of his reign, Constantine finally gets around to being baptized. He retires. He officially converts to Christianity. He helps build a church in his later years, and that's about it. So, really, with Diocletian and Constantine, we've seen tremendous shifts, tremendous upheaval going on within the Roman world. And we're going to see that continue even after the reign of Constantine, and ultimately leading to the demise of at least the Western Roman Empire. Thanks for listening. Listen to the next one. See you next time. Later.